Good to see you all. I'm happy to find my voice again, and it's wonderful to see you all from around the world. Thanks so much for joining us for 90 minutes of AI and design system love. Before we get started, just want to introduce our panelists today. Brad Frost, some of you may know, a principal here at Big Medium. He created the atomic design methodology and is, I think, quite fairly considered to be the godfather of web design systems. We've got Kevin Coyle. He's a technical lead here at Big Medium and our AI whisperer. He's also, by the way, a boat captain, and if you have a chance, ask him about his beagles. Afyia Smith is a longtime friend of Big Medium. She's a master documentarian of design systems. We've learned a ton from her, and she's currently doing that very work for Epic Games. And Ian Frost is a technical lead at Big Medium, and he's built the front-end code for dozens of enterprise design systems. Before the web swallowed him up, Ian was also a professional meteorologist, so you might ask him about the weather. Just don't blame him for it. And I'm your host, Josh Clark, also a principal at Big Medium. I'm a UX and product guy, and I'll be sharing how AI fits into design later in the show. So thanks for being here, everyone. I'm going to dismiss you back to the wings just to do a little bit of startup logistics going on here. Share this. So first, just to sort of let you know what's coming up is we've got 45 minutes of presentation coming. And so what that's going to be is 45 minutes of sharing from your panel here today. We're going to share what we've learned about AI and design systems. But then we've reserved an additional 45 minutes for a Q&A. So if you need to drop off after the presentation part, we totally get it, no hard feelings. But if you can stick with us, we'll be hanging around to discuss. So 90 minutes in all, plenty of time to become close friends. We'll be planning our vacations together by the end of this, I'm sure. For those 45 minutes, though, I think this probably goes in here. We want to hear your questions. We'll be gathering those along the way. So ask your questions in the QA section. That's the second button from the right on that list of icons. A little question mark speech bubble is what you're looking for. And I think that is all of the logistical housekeeping. The restrooms are down the hall to the right if you need them. Okay. We're going to talk about this thing called AI. I don't know if you've heard about this. Artificial intelligence, kind of everywhere right now. But I think it's worth acknowledging that the messages that we receive about it, as well as our own personal experience with it, have been kind of confusing, right? On one hand, it feels like this is something that's overhyped, or maybe it's underestimated, or sometimes it just seems like it's really smart, but man, so often it is so dumb. We're told it can do everything, but a lot of times it doesn't really seem to be good at anything, right? So we've got this hype, we've got the skepticism, the confusion, the fear, the excitement. And I think a lot of us, still are wondering in both our personal and professional lives, what is this actually good for? What does it change? What will it make better or worse? And so we're here today simply to share how our team at Big Medium uses AI in our work and in our personal practice. So what we want to explore here is how a design and creative team, and specifically a design system team, engages with this technology not only as a tool, but as a material for design and for development. First, in case you're not familiar with Big Medium, let me give you a little bit about us. We're a digital agency that specializes in what we call big design. And in a nutshell, we help complex organizations design and build and ship digital products at scale. So a lot of that work means helping just really big companies. Here's the obligatory slide of client logos. We've helped these really big companies deliver great, consistent work in their digital products. And then along the way, they get better at doing it together, right? Across teams, across products, across disciplines, across brands, across tech platforms. And a lot of that is less about design or technical solutions as much as it is about workflow and process and collaboration and, messy people stuff. That's a lot of words for saying we do a ton of design system work. But not only are we doing big design, we're also doing what we call sentient design. And that's our term for the future, the already here future of intelligent interfaces. And so it's all about creating AI-mediated experiences that seem almost self-aware in their response to user needs in the moment, the intent in the moment. So when you dial that up all the way, what you get is user experiences that are conceived and compiled in real time, what we call radically adaptive experiences. I'm writing a book about this with Veronica Kindred, and you can learn more about it at bigmedium.com. I bring this up because it turns out that design systems are really crucial to that kind of work, and we're going to share more about that later on. Most of what we'll share today, though, is less about AI for new product experiences and more about AI in our personal practice as design system builders and maintainers. Both of those are threads to keep an eye on, though, sort of not only the personal efficiencies that we have in our own individual practices and team practices, but also those opportunities to sort of, reimagine the user experience. The common goal between sort of both of those threads, though, whether it's AI and personal practice or in your product design, the goal here is to let people do what they do best and then let the machines do what they do best. And friends, those are almost never the same thing. So this isn't about replacing people or replacing creative tasks. And in fact, what you'll see today is that these systems really can't do those things, which I think we're probably all happy to hear. But really, it's about amplifying what we're great at as creative humans by supporting our activities in ways that are uniquely possible with AI or that were really difficult before AI. So this is about enabling, not replacing, which is a key design principle for us in all of these things. So thanks for bearing with me in the wind up here. Today, we're going to put some chocolate in our peanut butter and combine two of our favorite things, design systems and AI. We're going to share some experiments with AI and where we've adopted it, and also where we haven't adopted it, the stuff that just doesn't work or doesn't give enough benefit. And we'll sort of spell that out too. We're going to show how it helps with code and with documentation and with design. And again, just one last time, we want to hear about your experiences and questions too. So feel free to chuck any questions into the chat along the way. Again, the second icon from the top on the right there, and we'll be taking your questions after. All right. To kick off how we think about this in our client work around design systems, I'm going to hand this off to my partner, Brad Frost. As I mentioned, Brad created a methodology called atomic design that frames how a lot of us approach design systems. So Brad, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you for being here. We like to defining a design system is always a fun one. If we were to ask everyone in here, what's a design system, we would get many different answers. One of the things that we've tended to define a design system as is a story of how an organization designs and builds digital interfaces. And there's a lot of ingredients that go into telling that story. And perhaps like the most tangible parts of that story is kind of the assets of a design system. So Josh, if you go to the next slide here. We kind of refer to this as the three-legged stool of design system assets. There's a design library in a tool like Figma. There's the code corollary in whatever technologies you're using to build digital products. And then, of course, there's the sort of documentation that sort of wraps it all up and contextualizes it. It's kind of the instruction manuals for the IKEA parts, if you will. So while the assets get a lot of love, it's also people, right? It's assets and people orchestrated together and real human beings sort of interfacing and helping make all of this stuff go, coupled with really important processes like governance processes, contribution processes, adoption processes, and so on and so forth. So it's really this kind of orchestration of these assets, this technology, but also human people and processes that really makes all of this go. And I think that what we're going to be diving into is that AI is particularly well suited to assist us with the asset part of design systems. And the spirit of that assistance is to really free us up, us human beings up, to really focus on the human stuff, right? Sort of building relationships, building rapport, helping do support, helping enable and empower other teams. So we're excited to dig into all of this, but these are the ingredients that help us take a design system into an organization. quickly go over this just because I think by this point, we all know that design systems help promote UI consistency and cohesion for end users, resulting in less frustration and happier customers and more successful products. But so much of this and so much of the design system work and metrics around it and all that really have to do with speed and efficiency and just kind of taking the pain away from our workflow, right? So teams don't have to reinvent the wheel every time that they need a button or a card. They can grab one from the design system and go. That also leads to higher quality production because not everything is a first draft. And instead, teams are able to sort of take these components that have all of the good stuff baked right into it, right? Brand best practices, UX best practices, front end best practices, accessibility best practices, all baked into a consumable library of reusable components. These design systems are a platform for collaboration, right? Allowing designers and developers to speak the same language, cats and dogs living together, who knew? But also different products and different sort of silos across an organization. It helps everybody sort of, get on the same page and be sort of working from the same source of truth. And lastly, and this is a big one here, especially as we're talking about AI, is these things are future friendly foundations. And what we mean by that is that what we've seen and helped our client organizations do is establish these really critical front end infrastructure layers that ultimately end up powering how digital products get made at an organization. And once those foundations are in place, they could be extended and improved and modified and over time. And it also really helps set the stage and position an organization to capitalize on new and emerging technology like AI, where once you have these foundations in place, great, now what do we do with it? So all to say, boiling it down, is that design systems, as we all know, improve the quality and efficiency of digital work. And here comes this new emerging technology of AI. And so now it's, well, how can AI improve the quality and efficiency of our design system work, right? So that's what we're going to dig into today, is some of the ways that our team has been sort of exploring and poking at this. Like how can these new tools, these new technologies be used to help us out? And so while we're going to focus and be sharing some things that are here now, we're also going to be, and Josh is going to be talking about this in a little bit, showing what AI plus design systems unlocks for the future of user interface design, which is really exciting. Before we dig into the weeds, Josh already sort of mentioned a couple of the principles that we've been sort of, that have been emerging as we've been kicking the tires with all of this stuff, as we've been thinking about it and implementing it. One of the big principles for wielding these tools is really acknowledging and balancing our enthusiasm and optimism for these technologies with a healthy dose of skepticism and care and concern, right? Really sort of asking out of the gate and building this into the front of our minds, like anytime we're reaching for this stuff. What harm can this do? What can go wrong? Is this correct? Is this good? Is this ethical? Can I trust this? Right. So this is a time for simultaneous enthusiasm and exploration and curiosity, but also for really asking hard and important questions. Respect. This really comes back to what Josh was saying earlier about what we want to do is help humans do what they're best at, what we're all best at, right? To exercise good judgment, to work together, to collaborate, to spend more time, sort of building the human systems that really sort of are behind all of the software we create. How do we make the most of our collective talents and time on this earth in order to do better things than recreating a badge for the 15th time? It's really important not just to have humans in the loop on these processes, but really to have humans kind of own the input and the output and have the ability to sort of, edit things after the fact. AIs are this kind of black box, but so we really do need to have control where we can get it. And so we determine what goes in and what comes out. And having that access is really important, and agency. This is a really big one too. We've seen like a beautiful like crop of tools, 1,000 flowers are blooming all over the place, tools coming in left to right and center. And one of the things that we've really identified as kind of a core principle for wielding this stuff, especially as we work with specific organizations, we all know that design systems, in order to be successful, really need to be tuned to the needs and the goals of the specific organization, right? Uh, this is why we're not all just sort of reaching for bootstrap or material design. This is why we have sort of like differing implementations of stuff, right? But when it comes to AI, same thing holds true, right? Where it's not about like, oh, can we just make stuff faster? Yeah, we could generate a bunch of crappy code very, very quickly. Any one of us can do that right now. But how might we use this stuff to actually sort of empower and enable teams to work with the grain of their preferred working style? How do we use the code syntax and the brand standards and the UX best practices and the documentation that are tuned to the needs and goals of the specific organization? The next one is, it kind of comes down to, it is related, is like we need this stuff to be predictable and reliable. When we talk about design systems as this really critical front end infrastructure, we don't want to just throw a hand grenade in there. It's like we want things to behave predictably, and we want the results to be sturdy, right? So that's an emerging principle, and sometimes it doesn't. AI doesn't get these things right. So we will talk about that and demonstrate that here in a bit. And then the last thing, and this is very much related to the sort of organization specific solutions, it's really important, obviously, for things to be secure and private, and doing all the things that we can to make sure that we're not just like pasting a bunch of IP up to Chat GPT in the cloud and stuff like that. I'm sure many people have received plenty of emails on that front. But so anyway, so these are sort of some of the principles that we've been sort of thinking about. We've been helping our clients thinking about as we help them sort of navigate this new terrain. And so with that, I think what we'll do is we'll kind of turn into how we're actually using AI for our design system work. And I think that one of the big things to sort of point out, if we go to the next slide, we kind of coming back to this three-legged stool of kind of design, code, and docs. Again, these assets are really is the layer that AI is really well suited to help with. And because these LLMs deal with language, code and documentation are definitely like the most kind of we've seen the greatest results in those departments. Design is kind of like lagging behind a little bit. It's a little bit of a different beast. But when it comes to code, we're really kind of talking about wielding language and trying to sort of generate things in a predictable manner. And that's where we've seen the most success with to date. So one of the biggest and most important use cases for using AI in design systems is to generate code, right? Is to generate sort of component code. And what we've been doing, and what my colleague, our resident AI expert, Kevin Coyle, will show, is that we're able to sort of take coding standards, specification, and organization specific documentation and kind of feed that stuff into an AI in order to generate and help generate design system component code that is in the same shape and style as the rest of the component library. So with that, I will shut up and I will pass it off to the ever charming Kevin Coyle. Over to you,
Thank you
Kevin.
very much. Thank you, Brad. I've never been called charming before. That's rather nice. Thank you. So I want to show you some code generation with AI. Um, I can probably see at the bottom of the screen, there's loads and loads of avatars on there. So you've probably had enough at seeing avatars being generated, but I'm going to show you how to generate one and how we do it. Sorry about that. So just let me share my screen now. And when you can see it, can people just tell me that they can see my screen? Can people see my screen? Is it there?
We
Excellent.
can.
Okay. So we've been doing this for a while. We've been trying to generate code and we've been trying to get it to work. Oh, there's a lot of yeses coming through. Thank you. That's great. So we've been trying to do it. So we've done things like just putting it straight into ChatGPT, and sometimes results are quite mixed from that. We've been trying to make little applications around it to try and get it working and get it up to our really high standards. And between me and you, Brad has high standards with some of his code. So I need to make sure that this generated code is good. So the first thing that we've got to do is we need to think about our problem. And what we do at Big Medium is we write our problem down into this little YAML here. Now, this could be in a Jira ticket or it could be anywhere really. But what this little document says is what the component is that we're going to build, what properties it has, how it's constructed. You can do this in any way you like. We do it in this format because it's easy for us to fit it into the LLM, into the AI. Once we've done that, we've created a little application just over here. And we can talk to it. And we can say, it says to us, what would you like to do? And I'm going to type generate. Put in the component name, avatar. Do you want to generate the component from a YAML spec? Yes. If I typed no, it would just ask me to, describe it myself to it. But we've written that spec, we put time in it. Let's start the generation. Okay, so what it's going to do now is going to think about the problem. And if we can just put the slides on, I'll tell you what it's going to do. And I'll show you what it's going to do and how it's going to work. So if we can put a slide on.
Do that, Kevin. I just need you to stop sharing. There we go.
There we go. I've stopped sharing. That's right, Lauren. You might not have to write stories manually. So anyway, first thing that it does, it thinks about the problem. You give it this YAML file and it thinks, I'm going to need to write this. I'm going to need to do this. And that's really important because it distills the problem so that you can pass it to another model or another LLM. But after that, it's going to write some tests. And these tests at the moment in this version of the application I've written, they're not actually executed. These are just for us. And it'll write some unit tests. And we can use that to confirm that it's got it right about how the component is meant to behave. Bear in mind, it's not writing the component test from the code. It hasn't written any code yet. It's just doing the tests from the specification. But the next thing it's going to do, it's going to go and write a first attempt at the code. And this is just going to be really raw, really basic, won't fit up to Ian and Brad's high standards, but it's going to be working. It's going to get there. But then we need to do another pass to another specially trained model that then refines the code. And once it's refined the code, it'll go through our coding guidelines and make sure that it's right. It might do extra things, just making sure that the tabs are right, the spaces are right, and all those wonderful things that we take so much time to try and do with our manually written code. And then the final step, and this is really important, is this human refinement loop. That is one that's really, really important for us to do. We want to be able to tell the AI, change this a little bit, change that a little bit. It keeps us humans in the loop and most importantly in the job as well. Okay, so we're back to the AI now. If we can just share my screen. Gonna share it. All right, here's the grand reveal. Bear in mind, I didn't preface this. Most of the time, AI is a bit unpredictable and might not always work. So here's the avatar that it's created. It's got a little avatar here with the letter A in it. If we change it to an image avatar, so all this storybook is generated. This is a picture of Brad there. We can change the size to large, medium, small. And that's great and everything, but it's not that impressive. Let's make a change. The bot is going to ask me, what would you like to change? I'm going to see if anyone's got any suggestions in the chat. If you're not, in the next 5 seconds, I'm going to just do a boring one. 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do one whilst I'm waiting. Let's add an extra large size. All right. It's going to go back. Might fail. Bear in mind, this might fail. AI is what we call non-deterministic. We don't always know what it's going to do. A rounded square. Oh, we want to change it. I'll do that. And I'll do that next. I'll do a square. Or if someone wants a triangle, triangles are good. Anyone wants a triangle? No, I'll do a rounded square. We can do that. hexagon. I've never actually tried that before. I don't know. So it's just refining. This takes a little while. So I'm just distracting you a little bit. Okay, right. We had small, medium, and large before. Do we have extra large? We do. Look, it's a bigger Brad. Everybody likes that. Let's try one last thing with the avatar. You said someone said make it square. Instead of the avatar being circular, make it square. I didn't say please, so who knows if it's going to do it. And we'll just wait. And it's going to go through a similar process to before. It's going to look at the code and it will change it for us, hopefully. It might even do it right. Once this is done, I'm going to show you a more complex component because Avatar's a little bit boring, a little bit easy. There's loads of them. There you go. There's Brad. He's nice and square. Someone said make it rotate. I don't know. I could do that. Let's move on to a different component if we want. Another component that's a bit difficult to make is a date picker or a calendar. Some of the problems with that is accessibility and various other things, but generally just getting it built is quite difficult. So let's generate one and generate calendar. So I'm going to show you the specification in a second for this whilst it's generating. All right, it's going to generate the calendar now. Let me fire up the YAML spec for that and show you what I fed into it. Here's what I've said. It is a calendar, and a calendar widget can be used to show or select dates. It's got these properties on here like selected date, min date, max date, all those boring things that we have to do for calendars. And I've got a section here for some considerations. Multi-select. I made a multi-select yesterday, actually. I don't have it set up, but I did make one. So I might show that one. It was really fun. It took me 3 hours though. But I did make one, someone just said. Back to the calendar. Yep, this is what it does. And yeah, it's pretty cool. And we'll just wait. It's on the second pass solution now. This won't work completely out of the box. It doesn't usually do it. We might have to change something manually, but I just want to put it out there. If that happens, we're expecting to see a nice little calendar when it comes. Can we have an AI generate this YAML too? Yes, we can, Mike. We can do that, and we can get that from various sources. I like to have it in YAML, but yeah, you can get it from Jira, you can get it from anywhere, you can get it from screenshots, whatever you like. Still generating. We're on a third pass solution, doing some final touches. And has it done? We should see it. It might flash and break, but let's see. Generating storybook. There you go. You don't have to write it manually. Okay, let's see if we've got a calendar. Oh, almost. Okay, it's got it. There we go. There's a bit of a calendar there, but there's no month at the top of it. That's fine. I guess we should ask for that. Can you display the month and have some buttons at the top to select the month? Should I say please? I don't know, maybe. This, again, I'm prefacing this, it may not work. We're going to try and see if this does it. And if it does, we'll celebrate. If it doesn't, we'll commiserate. But at least we've tried, and we'll see what it does. So this will save a lot of time, generally, when you're doing it. And the idea is to have this feedback loop between you and the AI. And instead of you going in writing things manually, just tell it what to do and get better at it. And just... Oh, there you go. There we go. There we go. You see that? And then we got the buttons. And does it work? Did it work? Yeah, there we go. It works. Okay. And it's got the selected. We're in June. Go back to June. Yep. This is 12th of June, which is Friday. See, it's done. It's got the wrong day. It's got the wrong day for Friday. I wish it was Friday. I wish it was, but it got it wrong. We could tell it to fix that, but we don't have enough time to do it that now. So it's imperfect, it helps you out, and I hope that was enlightening. Back to you. So who wants to take the stage?
All right.
Right.
Thanks for that, Kevin.
No problem.
All right. So that's one use of, yeah, there we go. Hello. So that's like probably like the biggest and just in like most obvious and also impactful, I think, sort of use for all of this, which is why we want to show it. Um, One of the other things that we really deal with a lot is translating languages, right? Going from one framework to another. Many of the organizations we work with have loads and loads of different technologies, loads of apps and websites written, and all sorts of things. And historically, maintaining multiple technology stacks or translating one from the other was a hugely tedious and cumbersome and manual process. So what's really exciting is that because, again, these LLMs are dealing with language, you could take one language and quickly convert it to another language. So that's what Ian's going to share here in a second. So you can take, for instance, React code base and transform that into a web component code base. So over to Ian.
All right, hello everyone. I'm here to talk about code translation. For over a decade now, I've been building design systems, and I've kind of seen the landscape of design systems change. We started simply by building HTML, CSS, JavaScript, copying.
Sorry, Ian. Your sound is a little bit muddy. I think it might be your AirPods. That ever happen to anybody? You got your AirPods in and they're just like underwater or connected to the wrong device?
Does this sound better?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so when we first started building design systems, we built them in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, just vanilla. And then we've had to copy and paste over the markup and then import the proper files to get that working. In comes a bunch of frameworks like React, Angular, Vue. So we had to learn those frameworks and kind of translate everything into that. And as design systems have become more sprawling, because back then it was usually based around one product, now it's based around many different products, as we see with the large organizations we work with. We essentially need the ability to kind of cross these paths where, oh, we need it to work in React, we need it to work in Angular, we need it to work in legacy applications. And that's kind of where web components come in, where those can be used in all of these different frameworks to power the UI. And then, the Reacts and the Angulars can use their power to kind of hook into these things and use the proper UI, but use the strengths of these frameworks. So let me share my screen here. And can you all see my screen okay? I can't see you, so I'm assuming it's okay.
You got it. You look great.
Cool, thank you. All right, so let's say we have a mature design system. We have a bunch of React code, a bunch of components built. The code's already there. We feel great about our code guidelines. We feel great about our user APIs, our token system, all of those things. So what we're going to do here is we're going to build a badge component simply from this code that I'm showing here on the right. And to be clear, on the left here, we have, this is a React instance of Storybook, and this is the badge component with some variants. And then just to be clear, we don't have a badge component over here yet. So let's run our script and let's add badge. So that'll get sent into the AI system. This file will be used to kind of parse through that and kind of say, oh, let's translate this over into a lit web component. And we have some kind of like inaccessible parts to this, but we have like a click handler that kind of changes the badge to red. We also have a keyboard handler. Oh, by the way, hello AI and design systems audience. And what this will do is kind of go through the process. It takes a minute here, and we should get some code similar to what Kevin was showing. We're just not using a YAML file. In this process, we're using the actual source code that lives in the current design system. And a lot of times we've had to do this manually. I've built a badge so many times, and you kind of get sick of it after a while, right? You kind of want the machines to do the easy stuff, and then you can kind of go in and fine tune some of this. So now we go into the web component badge. Oh, the AI has kind of failed, but not really. So this is where the human touch, and I know Kevin was showing, you have the ability to add a user interface, but you can see this is a web component now. You can see DS badge is now a web component, and we have everything there. Let me actually build our next component, which is more of an accordion to kind of match what Kevin was doing with the calendar. We will do accordion, which contains accordion panel. What's great about this too is if you have that strong token structure in place and all of that, we can actually theme switch. And this all works properly because our tokens are all mapped properly, and we've created a smart system to work across multiple themes. So if your organization has multiple brands that it needs to support, but have the same kind of parts under the hood powering that, then you can do that as long as your system is sturdy. So let's actually check to see if the badge turns red. Yes, it turns red. Let's see if we could say hello again. And boom, we have hello AI and design systems audience. So all of the event handlers, all of the props and everything works out of the box. So this may take some time to kind of build the accordion panel and then the accordion. Brad, I'm not sure if you want to say anything extra about what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I think that people are asking, is it accessible and stuff, and the answer is yeah. So far, insofar as the sort of specifications and the code guidelines that this stuff is trained on, yes. But let's be 100% clear. This is not going to solve accessibility, much like in the same way that design systems do not solve accessibility. Like, accessibility is everyone's work. The machines should help assist, but at the same time, it really is our human responsibility to make sure that what comes out the other end is indeed accessible. And in fact, we are even going to sort of prep a demo about sort of accessibility review and stuff. And we just found that it wasn't cutting the mustard, right? Kevin changed a button to a div with a click handler on it. And I think that the number 6 bullet point in the review was like, oh yeah, that should probably be a button. So all to say, again, this is not like AI is going to replace us. This is not, AI is going to solve these problems for us. It really is an assistant, right? And we'll sort of get into that in a little bit more in a second here. Okay.
Cool. We have some more errors, which is always great when it comes to AI. But we have an accordion story showing up, which is great. So let's actually dive into our accordion.stories.ts file. Oh, we have a slot on the panel itself. That doesn't help things. And then we actually there we go. Things are starting to show up, which is good. And this is kind of what AI tends to do. It kind of gets confused sometimes. But as long as you have that human intervention, we have the ability to kind of change this stuff. Let me do that. text passage, and then tag name equals h3, variant equals title small. All right, we actually need to import our components. And while this seems like a painful process, it's a lot easier than having to copy and paste over certain things. What's going on here? Of course, it's yelling at me about certain things.
Text
Let's see
passage?
here. Maybe. Import text passage.
Yeah.
Import. Oh, what do we have in the air down here? No, wait.
Okay.
Ah, that's what it is. Okay. Apologies about that. Unsafe CSS. Unsafe CSS. They're usually pretty minor things overall, but property. Oh, that's what it is. That's fun. Import property state from lit decorators. There we go. We have something showing up now. Let's go back in
All right.
here. Okay. Ah, there we go. Okay.
There we go.
That feels better. Okay. So
Does it open?
Does it open and close?
All good. All right.
Okay.
Ian, for the sake of time, but I hope the spirit is here where it's like, even for simple components, it's obvious what we can do, which is really powerful. It's like, okay, we could generate this stuff super quickly. But even for more complex components, we have this opportunity to sort of get a big leg up on this stuff, whether it's taking an old gnarly, sort of something written in another framework and bringing it over into a new thing. Stuff like that is super powerful. And I think we've seen some good sort of chatter in the chat. This idea of sort of having this kind of like specification and so starting from here really opens the door for a lot of things. So which is exciting because you could sort of describe what your component is, and then there's the kind of individual implementations. So it's like, this can be used to generate a bunch of iOS libraries or Android libraries or web component libraries or Angular, like really like whatever you want. There's this kind of like idea of, we can have our source of truth be this kind of specification and then sort of be able to roll this out into many different languages, whatever we want, which is like really powerful. Again, it's not going to get us 100% of the way there, but just to sort of expedite this process is I think really exciting. Similarly, I think another exciting use case for this that's in the spirit of translation, what Ian was showing earlier, one of probably the biggest issues right now that we face when working with design systems is we have these well-meaning design system teams, and we're right in the fray with them, and we're helping them sort of establish and evolve their architecture. We have the rest of the product organization that, even if they believe in the design system effort, which isn't always the case, they're just like, well, we're strapped for time, right? Like, we want to use the design system, but we don't have time. We're sort of too busy hustling on this stuff. Wouldn't it be cool if we had these sort of AI tools that help us in that department? So what we can do, and what we've been sort of kicking the tires on, is like, let's actually take some legacy product code bases, right, existing product, and convert that into a design system version of that code base. So what I did was just kind of took a couple demos. We've done this with some client products as well, but if we go to the next slide, you can see a demo. This was just kind of taking a Bootstrap sample from the Bootstrap's website. So already pretty like kind of component driven and stuff. And just by way of sort of running it through the process and saying, here's our design systems conventions, we end up with a design system powered version of that same page, which is like really impressive. It doesn't get us all the way there, but all of this, the code on the right is the sort of design system powered code, and it's in the same shape as our design systems convention. Similarly, I took just Nike's checkout flow as just another sort of random use case. So let's see what happens with this. But what I'm doing here in the storybook is just like Ian was demonstrating with the theme switching. Once it's in our architecture, we get all of the superpowers of that architecture, right? So we can sort of snap our fingers and at least get some semblance or a head start on converting things over to our design system. So hopefully this takes the sting out of like, oh man, we don't have time, or we'd like to do this, but we don't know how. Could you partner with your product teams and say like, hey, like let's actually do some pilot projects where we're actually running, we're using AI tools to help you adopt the design system. So this is what Nike's checkout website was showing for like a first name text field. And this is what the AI kind of produced on the other side. Not complete, not perfect, but at the same time, it's like, it understood that it was a text field and it had this ID and this label and stuff like that. So really, really powerful stuff. Okay. This is the best way to sort of think about all of this. It's like, it's going to create some stuff, but also just in the same way that you don't just let your junior developers and summer interns just push stuff to prod without reviewing it. this is how to think of this kind of stuff, right? And it requires a lot of handholding, and it requires some refinement and some checks and balances. So what we're going to talk about next before moving on to documentation is very quickly showing how unit tests can be written. So back over to Kevin to sort of quickly demonstrate this, but we'll want to move on to the documentation and design side of things.
Share my screen again and show you some tests. These were generated as we were generating our components earlier. I didn't want to show you them just then, just might bog us down with all this stuff. But we don't generate tests from code. If you do that, you tend to get tests that pretty much will always pass, and the tests will be engineered basically based on the implementation. You don't want to test your implementation. You want to test, does it work? Does it do what it should do? Does it look right? So these are some auto-generated tests that give you a head start on testing, and these were generated as we did the component, and they get added to as we make additional adjustments as well. And that's important to keep your tests up to date. So these are just a few. It's written in a test format that we use. I'm not going to run them because I think they'll just fail at the moment, but they're just auto-generated. And the idea is to keep your tests up to date as you're writing your code, and make sure that you're not testing your code. You're not writing your tests from the code. That's pretty much it with testing, though. It's something that should be done. Definitely. Some people, when they've been generating code, do sometimes feed the test results back in to the AI. And I've been experimenting with that myself with some success. Just takes a long time for the generations to do it. But maybe in the future, we'll do a demonstration where we do that sort of methodology as well. And that's testing. Over to you again, Brad.
All righty. And I think that what we'll do now, so clearly clearly code and testing and generating code and translating code is like a huge use case for wielding AI and design systems. But the next leg of the stool is documentation, which is another fertile territory for AI to inject itself. So with that, we will pass it over to expert documentarian, Afyia Smith, to walk us through what that might look like.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. I'm happy to be here and happy to talk about my little corner of the world, which is documentation. Even more excited to talk about documentation and AI. I'd love to begin by just chatting a bit about the value of documentation, which is evident in what it does to help reduce those lost in translation moments between teams, the value of what it is as a living inventory of components, usage guidance, and best practices, and then the value of who it helps, which is really everyone from designers to developers to product managers, all of those folks that use a design system, ensuring that they have the knowledge they need. So I could go on and on about the value of documentation, but what I'm really here to talk about and most excited to solve for are some of the frustrations with documentation that I've experienced, as well as what I've heard from users. These frustrations fall under two categories, which are no one writes documentation and no one reads documentation. And the common issue with writing documentation is it's often sidelined either due to lack of time, some perceived difficulty, or that it's just some boring task of the design system. And even when documentation is available, it's often ignored, whether it's not user-friendly or not up to date, or just not applicable to the user's current needs. So there's this misconception that I've noticed that if something is frustrating, it's often deemed as not valuable or unimportant. And it was this piece of it that set me on the path to experimenting with AI and documentation. I've been thinking about and experimenting and just learning how AI, ChatGPT in particular, can help improve the process of writing documentation, enable collaboration and contribution, and provide a better overall user experience. So the first question I set out to answer is, how can AI help when no one really writes documentation? Imagine you're a designer, you're on a small design system team. Your primary responsibility is to create components for your design system. Color palette is arranged, typeface is in order, components created, all wrapped up in a nice, neat Figma file or sketch file, whatever application you use. And now you need to document how to use all of those things. And your first hurdle is to get past this blank page. It's daunting, even for the most seasoned writers. Imagine how terrifying it could be for a non-writer. I've created a formula that helps get us past that blank page. Learning ChatGPT, I got to understand the importance of a good prompt. A prompt is just a set of instructions, you input, and you get an expected output. And I realized that a framework is the key to writing a good prompt. I created the RICO framework. It stands for Role, Information, Context, Output. And with this framework, I was able to write a very simple and single prompt. So these are the initial set of instructions that I'll provide to ChatGPT to help set the context and guide its response. And I'll read it for you really quickly. Imagine that you are a documentarian who creates usage guidance for components in the design system. For each image provided, the output should be a page that documents that component. The content should be written from the perspective of a senior level design system designer, and the audience will be designers and developers new to the company or have entry-level experience or are seasoned professionals. And I want to go ahead and play that demo, if you could, Josh. And here I've copied and pasted that prompt. And I went ahead and uploaded an image of the button component. It'll take a few seconds to generate. So right away, there's a few things that we can highlight on the formatting of the content, including the use of headers, subheaders, bulleted line items that are now distinguishing the different design attributes. and different usage guidance, primary versus single action. And you'll notice some interaction guidance, behaviors of the different interactive states. Some implementation notes are coming through as well. And some do's and don'ts. And so, this is a really good enough first draft and a good starting point for for any non-writer to pick up from and expand on. But because I write documentation, I had a format. And this is kind of what it would look like once done and populated into a reference site, something like Zero Height. This is an example of what that would look like. And then the next question that I set out to answer is, well, how can AI help when no one really reads documentation? Today, next slide. Today, documentation is fixed. Sometimes you'll find it in a Google Doc or some external site application. It's literally stuck to a single access point. So I do pose a question, what if AI could make documentation unfixed and fluid? Over to Josh.
Josh, you're muted.
Thanks. Seems to be a little problem for me. So as Afyia had mentioned, is like we're still asking these what if questions, as we're starting to learn more. It's like, oh, this works well, this doesn't work well, this needs some help. What are the places where we're seeing benefits? That we're still sort of experimenting with a lot of these things. One of the things that we're really especially sort of seeing is how do we actually put design systems to use with AI at the product level. So I'm going to come back a little bit to some of the construction kinds of things on the Figma side, but I wanted to share some thoughts about how we're thinking about doing product design. And I mentioned earlier, we call our practice sentient design. A core piece of this are these radically adaptive experiences. So just at a base level, chatbots are an example of that. You can ask a chatbot like ChatGPT anything in any topic, and it can come back to you with a plausible response. Sometimes even an accurate response, but it can sort of like flex and follow you along. So you can craft this whole meandering conversation that is absolutely one of a kind, unique, right? An experience that totally bends to your current wants and needs. That's what we're talking about with radically adaptive experiences. These are things that are conceived and compiled in real time. And we're familiar with that with things like recommendation or prediction, Netflix recommendations. Well, that's adaptive to me and to my specific context or the context of the network in the moment. So the content is adaptive there. That's really sort of familiar enough to be almost boring at this point. But what happens when we adapt structure and interaction too? Let's start with this demo from the Google Gemini team. Gemini, of course, Google's AI chat experience. And while this demo starts in traditional chat, it does something exciting that they call bespoke UI. I'm afraid I'm not able to play the audio, so I apologize. I'll be speaking over this gentleman to explain what's happening. He's looking for inspiration for a birthday party theme for his daughter. And so he types that in, and Gemini says, happy to help. What's she interested in? And so he tells Gemini that she loves animals, and they're thinking about doing something outdoors. And now at this point, instead of responding in text, Gemini creates a bespoke interface to help explore ideas. Well, hello, that's interesting, right? We're just sort of going here, and all of a sudden, here's this question. Well, here's exactly the UI to present that information, to sort of engage with it. Let's look under the hood here a second. The system understands that the goal is to plan a birthday party. So we know that it's for a kid who likes animals and that she wants to do something outside. So here, the LLM, Gemini, is doing the interpretation to understand if it knows enough to build a UI around this. And it says, the request is still ambiguous. It needs to learn more. We don't know what kinds of animals she likes. We don't know what kind of outdoor activity. But the system determines that we still have enough information to proceed to provide a UI to browse and get that info. But what kind of UI? So now it identifies the right UI to use. It knows the content to present, party themes, activities, food options. So here's where it starts to get interesting. It identifies the right layout to use. It's a summary of several party ideas. And it looks like it wants to use a layout called list detail layout. So wait a second here, friends. There's a design system of components that supports this little application. And the AI has been trained on what those components are for, the use cases, taking usage guidelines like what Afyia was sharing, and learning those things. So it says, I've got this problem and this content. Here is the UI element to pour it into. So the AI knows the design system so it can pick from a curated set of tools. So let's see how this story continues. He knows his daughter would love farm animals, so clicking that triggers the system to render this new content inside the code it wrote. And his daughter loves cupcakes, so he highlights that. And now he can drill into any part of the interface to ask for more information. So in this case, he's going to ask for step-by-step instructions on how to bake this, and it starts to generate this new UI. And this time, it's another set of design components best suited for step-by-step instructions. So you see what happened there? Click anywhere in the interface to get this information about that little tidbit, cupcakes here, right? And that's like a totally unplanned path that was not designed or created by any designer, could not have been anticipated. It's this radically adaptive experience based on this immediate need or just a whim of the user. And that could go totally off the rails. It's like the AI and the human talking together. You can't anticipate sort of where that's going to go. But by giving it a tight design system and interactions around that, the system stays within the appropriate not only look and feel, but sort of predictable interaction. It keeps the thing on the rails. We're seeing that approach with what Apple's calling Apple Intelligence and this really carefully gated UI surrounded application of AI. So more than providing an answer, this is the place where LLMs can really shine. Because we've seen they're not so great always with answers, with facts. They're sort of fuzzy. So what we can do instead is understand what the user is trying to do. They're really good at sort of understanding and synthesizing context. Collect and synthesize that information, often getting it from other systems, and then select the right UI for it and deliver it. So take this out of chat for a moment, right? What does this mean for data dashboards? How can we populate a specific area or corner of our interfaces, for example, with these sort of just-in-time experiences that are suited to the specific content? So I'm just sort of saying here that design systems and best practices become more important than ever as we're asking AI to mediate a lot of experiences. We're giving them the consistent set of rules and application. So let's look at a simple example of how we can spin something like this up ourselves. Again, this is sort of a different take on what LLMs can do. Okay, so just as a reminder that LLMs are really good at doing things like understanding different language and formats, let's just ask for it to respond to us in French. And while we're at it, why not ask for it in JSON format? Great, now I have en réponse in a JSON object. So now it's like we're having a conversation, it's still giving me answers, but in a specific format and language that I've asked for. So let's get some information. Now I have a JSON object of museums, musée, and it's an array, each of these museum objects with a name and a description. So again, I'm asking it for information like you normally would, but it's giving it to me in this specific format. Now, when I sort of can switch to Spanish again, right? So it's language, format, these are just manipulating symbols to it. It's sort of all the same to these systems. So now if we say I want to display this as a carousel of cards on a website, give me the sort of object for that, then it's giving me this carousel JSON object that's full of items with each card having a title and a description. You can see it even filled in the image URL there with an example.com image placeholder and settings. It's like it's giving me some controls in here too. So may as well say, I don't know, just give me the whole HTML, right? You've sort of given me this object, just give me a page that actually shows me this information. And so you can see some stuff going by here, some link and CSS style sheets, as well as some inline CSS. We've got the HTML for that carousel, same kind of content in Spanish that we had before, as well as sort of those controls. So if we port that into a browser, the only change that I made here is to actually put in actual images. We have this working carousel. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is not that an LLM can code. We've already sort of seen that, and by now that's kind of a familiar concept. The point is that an LLM is an amazing chameleon. So this content can be translated and transformed into whatever form or tone or context that it works. So they have they've internalized symbols, as a way to think of this, of language, of visuals, of code. And they can summarize and remix and transform those symbols. Those symbols mean the same thing, whether you're telling it to speak in French or Spanish or JSON or markup. You can move from, French to Chinese to UI. So sometimes they can turn those things into answers, but really they're manipulating these symbols for concepts and associations among those concepts. So what's interesting then is like, well, what other kinds of inputs can we give to it? So Tim Paul of gov.uk put together this AI experiment to show how a LLM can translate a PDF into a web form. So on the left, you see the PDF of the original government form. And on the right, the PDF has been converted into a multi-step form, one question at a time. And it's all using components from gov.uk's design system. So this is similar to the example we were showing with the museums before, only instead of text prompts, the PDF is effectively the prompt, or at least the data source. And the LLM does its magic of translating these visual symbols into formatted data, into HTML, and then in the UK government's specific brand and format. But again, LLMs are great at understanding all kinds of symbols, including, the hand-drawn notation of our wireframes or sketches. It is just symbols, translating it from one context to another. So change your thinking a little bit as designers, being sort of like, oh, it's not necessarily about generative content. It's about understanding the context, getting some content, perhaps from an entirely different system, not necessarily the generative AI itself, and formatting it into a new context. How can we then be collaborators with the AI to provide kind of the rules and design language for it to use? I think that's pretty exciting. So what I'm getting here is, we've been talking a lot about how today AI is part of our design system toolkit. A big area that we're working in is how our design system's now part of our AI kit. I do want to acknowledge, though, that a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about with code, it's like, how do we generate code? How can we sort of like get some scaffolding for design? We haven't yet done a ton with that in the design area. We're just about to start experimenting with reading and writing to Figma. And who knows, they've got their big conference this month, and this year it's been very in vogue to announce new AI features. So who knows what Figma will be bringing us. But we're intrigued by the possibilities, either to quickly build new Figma mockups or to build code based on Figma designs. And as we saw with code, it will be imperfect. But there is still sort of an interesting generative model as we start to think about how does it fit in not just into our product work, but into our own personal practice. There are products that are already doing stuff like this that you can check out. Builder.io is converting Figma to code. Weezard, UIZard, I'm not exactly sure how to say it. Weezard is doing sketch to design file to code. So we're just starting to dip our toe into that. But for example, a fellow named Eric Vyacheslav, excuse me, Eric, shared this video on LinkedIn of a Figma file getting generated based on a product requirements document, a PRD. He didn't share many details on how it worked. That is important, of course, but a little bit beside the point of what I want to make now. As we think about how to do this, we think back to Kevin's example of that YAML configuration file. We could use something like that to generate not only code, but draft Figma files. We have a requirements document that is now driving both design and development in this context. Of course, this isn't done. This is probably a pretty clumsy implementation. It's not super well styled. The question after this is, how do we use it? And by whom? What is this useful for? Maybe this is more useful for non-designers to express ideas than for designers doing actual productive work. So how could tooling like this maybe make our work more inclusive, expand the conversation? And likewise, what if we run it in reverse? What if we start with a Figma file to generate that YAML configuration file? Or what if the Figma file is effectively the configuration file and we start to build code and requirements out of that? Lots of things to think about here, and we're only starting to get into some of the AI plus Figma world ourselves at Big Medium. I think the point that we've sort of been trying to make here is that this is a time for experiments and exploration. This stuff is not perfect. It's not magic. It's not going to be for a long time, but it is interesting. And I think that in some very interesting ways, it can help not only the work that we do day to day, but that we present to our customers. It takes care to understand how to put gates around it, do it in a responsible way, as Brad said at the beginning. But in fact, this session is an experiment for us. This is the very first time that Big Medium has organized an online session like this. And so we'd love to know what you think about it. You'll be getting a survey about it in your inbox after this. We'd really be grateful to know what you thought about it and if this is something that we should continue. Meanwhile, as you do your own experiments with AI and design systems, you're not alone. I'd be remiss while you're all here, not to mention that we do this for a living. We help other companies figure this stuff out. We publish a lot as we learn, and please take that, use it as you can, follow along at bigmedium.com. But of course, we also do engagements to build and design and maintain design systems and to create AI tooling and process and to do AI product design. And we also do workshops and executive sessions. So our whole emphasis is to make our knowledge your knowledge. That's the spirit of today. So that the folks that we work with and the friends that we make in venues like this have the confidence to take things forward on their own. And so, speaking of all of this, how can we help you now? At long last, it's question time. Maybe we can bring everybody onto the stage and we can take some questions.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out here. We're going to spend the next bit of time answering questions. So if you're able to stick around, that'd be great. We're also doing our best to just kind of drop some text answers into things just because we're running out of time as we are wont to do. As you might know, we're no strangers to talking. But let's get into sort of some of the stuff. There's some highly ranked questions like this one from Ollie. How do you educate business leaders that AI isn't going to replace designers and hire less? How do you avoid falling into the obvious perceived value, which is reducing staff and costs?
I'd be happy to take a crack at that. I think one of the things, look, AI is just technology. It's just software. It's a new tool. And the march of technology is generally in the service of productivity. That certainly, was an emphasis of what we're doing today of, what can these tools do? I think that there's a lot of magical thinking that's happening right now, and perhaps in some of the business leaders that you're describing here, that it can just do the work perfectly. Ta-da, we don't need developers anymore. I think if you took anything from this, I trust one of the things is like, this isn't perfect. It gets us going, it gets us moving faster. Sometimes its weirdness actually gives us new ideas. It is just a tool though, and used in the right ways, it can speed our work. And so there are efficiencies there. But I think one of the things that we can do as designers and developers using this stuff at the front lines of it is just be really transparent about what doesn't work and where we do need human eyes on this stuff. And I think part of it is also understanding that for a lot of business leaders, their motive, their incentive is around efficiencies, is around the bottom line. That is how they are rewarded, right? So that's going to be the first thing that they see. So one of the things that we can do is understand that that's a reality, that those are business realities. But two, what else can we do with this? It's like, if this is actually something that can amplify our creativity as designers or developers, or create new opportunities to create entirely new and radically adaptive experiences for our customers, what are those opportunities? And how can those things that are important to us as practitioners be married to those business imperatives? I think about it a lot in terms of UX, where the job of UX design is to take the business goal and find the customer goal and find that narrow, thin, hard to find path that connects the two and light it as brightly as we can. And I think that that's one of the things that we can do as we think about AI, is participate in the conversation and say, yes, this does need to have an ROI, but also look what we can do here. How can we marry those interests? Because I think what we can't do is sort of say efficiency is unimportant, the bottom line is unimportant, because that is a losing conversation that misses the reality of the organizations we work for.
All right, let's we'll be done with that one, and then on to the next one, which is, have you explored using a design systems documentation to train an LLM to provide design guidance to answer design related question? From Leaf.
I'd love to
Afyia, you
jump
want
in
to
and
take that one? Yeah, go for it.
yeah, we've absolutely been thinking about and exploring ways that we can use, existing design documentation, whether it sits in a reference site or in a Google Doc, to train an LLM and to repurpose that documentation and have it appear in different places or every place. An example of that could be you're in Figma and you're, hovering over a component, and maybe documentation on how that component works can be surfaced there. So there's tons of potential for AI and documentation, and using it to show up just only the information that a user needs at the time that they need it. I don't know, Josh, if you have anything else to add to that, but
I
that's
think
my
that's right.
answer.
I think developers, designers, this will sound familiar to you, where a developer is building something. They're like, I don't know what this thing is supposed to do. And it's like, well, have you looked at the documentation, the usage guidelines? It says exactly what it's supposed to do. And it's like, oh, ta-da, that works for human developers. And frankly, it works for the robots too. It's like, let's feed these systems all of the context that they need to understand what the output is. One of the astonishing things of, Kevin's example is it's like, oh, here's a YAML documentation file that says this is how it's supposed to work and what our expectations are. And it can understand that. And the same goes for more traditional usage guidelines.
All right. In the spirit of time, are we able to use AI for design automation in Figma, for example, publishing libraries, component creation for illustrations, iconography, and Figma variable syncing with the GitHub repo?
We think so. We haven't done it yet. And I think we don't want to understand is, under the hood, a Figma file is just sort of JSON, and that there are these APIs that are available. So what we know is, just like looking at code alone, is it can sort of figure out that stuff. And so we are also optimistic that perhaps in combination with more sort of algorithmic, deterministic requests to the Figma API, or just reading these, JSON files under the hood, that it will be able to make sense of them in a close enough to be useful way. And I think that's, by the way, a way to think of it is like, it is rarely going to be perfect, and it's never going to be the same from moment to moment. So I think a lot of what you can sort of say is like, what if we could get this to close enough to be interesting for purpose X? And purpose X may be different from purpose Y, right? Like, I think there are certain questions that you ask of an LLM that it's okay if it's wrong, but in the general territory. And there are some questions where it is literally deadly if it is even a little bit wrong. For example, around airline safety, that it's like, oh, that could be a real problem. So it's like all about context and what is the usage. If you were going to use any of these code generators that we saw today to ship actual shipping product without human intervention, well, that would be broken, right? That just would not work. That would be unacceptable. Other cases, we have things that are a little bit more forgiving. And that even, as Afyia, you were showing with the documentation, a first pass can often be kind of like good enough to get us moving. And it's more forgiving in some ways than stuff like code or airline safety.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things that also kind of come to mind. We've been trying to do and automate the design to development process for ages, right? Whether it's Dreamweaver and PSD to HTML, but even tools like Zeppelin and stuff that are like, and now dev mode and stuff like this. This is like a long standing tradition. And I think that we've kind of had this sort of, the desire is there. It's clearly a problem. But at the same time, a lot of times we're just like, give me the tool that is going to just like make all of this go away and make all of this work. And so much of our work with many organizations has everything to do with the human beings involved in getting designers and developers closer together, speaking the same language. And yes, that manifests itself in design libraries and code libraries and design token architectures and nomenclatures. And we like have all of that stuff, and that's important, but that's only one part of the picture, right? So much of it, coming back to the beginning where we're talking about, it is the orchestration of people or of assets and tools and technologies, but with people and process all orchestrated together. And so like, we always tend to push back, or not push back because the sentiment is right. How do we make this go smoother? How do we make the design and development world more sort of integrated and less painful? Those are very desirable and understandable goals, but also it needs to come with the, how can we become better at working at it as a team? And that's one of the biggest things that we relish, like with our client engagements, is like really sort of plugging in, working with the teams, establishing better relationships, better working relationships, better relationships between the design system teams and the consuming teams, or designers and developers working together. So it really is all of that. So forgive the spiel, but and it's not a dodge. Figma, I have a strong hunch that in a couple weeks at Config, they'll be probably showcasing sort of some of this stuff, and but don't forget the human side of it as well. Okay, we got a couple minutes left. Lightning round. You guys ready? Everybody ready? All right. How do you keep a structure so AI can give oh, did it just boot everyone out? Can you still hear me?
Hey, Brad. Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing anybody else, any of the rest of the team. Oh, here they come again. If Kevin's still around and can still hear me.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it. Do you want to
great.
take this
I don't know if you can see me.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
just decided to get tired or something. But
We
go
can hear
for
you.
it. Answer.
all right, I'll have a go at answering this one.
Yeah.
How do we get a consistent structure? How do we do that? It's basically through having a few good pieces of information to give to the AI. The first one is making sure that you have good code guidelines. And these are the same code guidelines that you will give to human beings. Make sure that they're really clear about how you intend for your component to be made. The second is making sure that you have really good requirements. And we do that in that YAML file. And that's why we do it, so we can just easily write it and we can share it between different people in the team. And the third one is making sure that we have good design tokens. That really helps get you a head start for the basic styling. You're going to have to do a lot of the styling yourself with the current applications that we've made, but there are future things that will enhance that, and it'll get you even closer there. So they're the three things that are very important.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, got time for a couple more. So here we go. What LLMs are you using for the code generation? How do you choose which LLM to use? That's also a Kevin question.
I had to refresh the page to
there we go. Okay. This is a you question. What LLM are we using? How do we decide to pick an LLM?
Right. So there are a few factors that I took into consideration when we were looking at the different LLMs available. One is one that has good documentation and integration with the tools that I was using. So I built this application in Rust. So I chose to use one of the GPT ones. I chose to use GPT-4 for the requirement gathering, and where it needs to do some I wouldn't say thinking, but it needs to have a bigger training set to be able to get you the basic requirements. Then what we've got as well is we want to get some speed in there. So a fine-tuned GPT 3.5 model is the next goal, to get that a bit faster and to get more coherence. Because I think you might have seen, we were lucky this time, but in other generations, it'll have little errors here and there. And having a fine-tuned model, once you've got that big stock of good components, means that it'll adhere more to the way in which you want your code to be generated. But currently, we're just using the GPT-4 models.
Yeah, but it's like this stuff is changing daily, weekly. It's like impossible to keep up with. And I think that this is sort of one of the spirits, this kind of continuing in the tradition, whether we're talking frameworks or anything else. It's like, how do you establish solid architecture, foundations, processes, just mental models around this stuff when the sort of tool landscape continues and just churning constantly, right? So it's like, how do you sort of capitalize on the available tools of the day, but at the same time sort of transcend them, right? And build your architecture. And Kevin, you've done it. You're like, oh yeah, we'll just swap this model out for this one, and there you go. And it's like, so having that architecture in place is really important. That's the kind of stuff that we're working with our clients on now, is standing up that architecture. Here's how you do this in a way that isn't just going to work with today's tools standing on one leg exactly just right, but here's how we're able to sort of grow and evolve this architecture and infrastructure as the technologies themselves evolve. Okay. Got time for like two more. Yeah, one more. Okay.
All right, let's see what we can do.
All right, two more. Let's say lightning round. We've been bad lightning round people. How do we combine the design system, token strategy, and AI?
I'm guessing this is like a code question. Kevin or Ian, do you want to tackle that? I know you've been sort of like wrestling with some of the styling stuff and token usage.
Okay, so let's just define two things here, because they've got the same name. We've got design system tokens and we've got AI tokens. And the AI tokens is like little fragments of words that add up in there. And this is important to consider whenever you're creating a large prompt. You really, even though AIs nowadays have a large context window, they can fit in a lot of tokens, you can say a lot of words to them. It's still not a good practice to give loads and loads of information to the AI at once, because you get something called drift. So that's why we do them in different stages. We apply different filters each time, and we will apply the coding guidelines, then give it a lick of paint with some design tokens on there, and do it in that filter paradigm, because that means that we don't get much drift from the original intention of what we're telling it to do. If you give it a full book, it goes off on one and it does some strange things, in my experience. But combining all those things in different stages help.
I think to add on to that, it's like the AI can kind of live in its own package too, and kind of get imported into your project and kind of be an assistant, right? You can essentially be like, all right, we want to run this prompt and give me this component, write the YAML file, and it spits it out. And then you kind of have that all co-located if you want it all in the same project. But it can be kind of the beef on top of the design system project.
Yeah.
One minute question. Here we go.
All right, here we go. Last but not least. All right, so we're going to say, I'm going to skip Tim's question. I hope we answered that last one, but this one, I'll kick this over to Josh. How do you ensure that AI generated designs maintain a human touch and authenticity? And this is, I think, a good way to put a bow on all of this.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, because this is the important thing, right? It's like we are sort of introducing the robots to their human overlords, not the reverse here. Like, right? We want human empathetic experiences. And what we're seeing already is a fair amount of just like mediocre content and AI generated images and just sort of like all that stuff that's kind of like flooding it. You can spot it, you can smell it. We don't want it, right? Like that's not the future that we're gunning for. What we can, however, do is sort of like think about the first part, the AI generation. It's weird, it's strange. How can that be a productive friction for you as you're creating new images or even creating new copy? It's like, that's not what I would make. That's never anything I would ship. But wait a second, that is an interesting direction, right? So there's sort of something that it's like, how can we use their weirdness as creative friction? I think the second bit around it, though, is also sort of like, maybe they aren't supposed to generate the designs, and I think that that's an important bit of it. I think that what we're seeing is that they can do interesting scaffolding to sort of like get some of the muted work out of it. But then they can also be sort of things that can be sort of like LLMs especially are much better kind of train conductors than they are actually driving the train, and what I mean by that is what we were showing in the demos there with the radically adaptive interfaces of, oh, wait a second, this is something that can actually understand input and content and sort of like assemble the correct human generated design system. rather than building out their own design system. So I think part of this is like, again, not a replacement. Oh, how is this an interesting, useful tool? What does it let us do that we couldn't do before? Not what we've always been doing. I think it's fine to look at how does it help us do what we've always been doing. But the really exciting stuff is what is possible now that wasn't before because it was too expensive, too hard, too much time. What can we do? And I think one of those things, like we were showing, is really adaptive experiences that can put together real time, conceive and compile user experience in real time using very human generated designs and rules. Whew, a little long, I missed a minute.
No, that's all good. Just to add on to like that last part, it's like that human centric design is we are able to meet people where they are more, right? Like it's adding a new dimension of sort of personalization to it, which is ultimately what we're striving to do, right? As sort of good designers is helping people and meeting them where they're at and helping them sort of get things done and make things happen. And this is an extra layer of tools in our toolkit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Friends, thanks for sticking with us. I know some of you have had some platform issues. We're sorry about that. We're hopeful that the video still managed to keep up along the way. And please don't feel bad if you had some platform issues. It's nothing personal. It did it to us too. So anyway, we'll work on that for next time. Thanks for coming, and please have a Thursday that history will never forget. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, take care all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.